the community. So I found, sorry about that. I found that actually involvement with local citizen science projects has been a very fertile source of research opportunities for STEM students in their first 2 years. And I would really encourage anyone who's interested to take a look at that. I think it's a very productive way to go.
Great. And the network PI, Heather.
Hi, sorry, I was a minute late. I had a technology problem. I'm just, so I'll introduce myself first, and then I will go to our next phase, which is telling you more details about the network and our goals. I'm Heather Vance Chalcraft. I'm in the Department of Biology at East Carolina University, which is in Eastern North Carolina. And I look at citizen science from more of an educational perspective, dealing with biology education research. And how can we use this as a tool to monitor student learning outcomes and see whether or not all these great benefits that we feel like the students are getting out of it, we can actually measure in some quantitative or qualitative way. And so my involvement started off as kind of looking at the educational benefits of using a particular citizen science project, Caterpillars Count. And from there, we kind of became interested in a broader question of the use of citizen science as a way to expose students to authentic research. And so it kind of went from there. So I'll tell you a little bit about the network. Let me see if I can share my screen. Bucky, I think you've got to let me share.
You're good.
Okay, great. All right. Are you seeing the weird version or the one with the notes or not the notes?
Looks like no notes. I think we're
so you read no notes. All right, so let me swap that. Now you're seeing the correct version?
I'm seeing presenter mode, I guess.
Oh, now you are. Okay, sorry, I thought you said before you could. All right, sorry. There we go. So we're talking today about the Use Cit Sci Network, and what that stands for is the Undergraduate Student Experiences with Citizen Science Network, Use Cit Sci. And there are actually 3 PIs on this particular project, and then a number of other people who help out substantially. You have met Bucky, Terry, and me. Alan Hurlbert is the other PI. He's in the field right now, I think. And this network is a research coordination network funded by the National Science Foundation. And research coordination networks are basically funded projects where it is trying to get people together to collaborate on some big topic. And so the funding goes towards getting people together to share ideas, develop ideas, and make recommendations and so on. And so you'll see how we have interpreted that for this particular project. So our overarching purpose, our kind of mission statement, is that we are striving to create a diverse community of practice of individuals invested in using existing citizen science projects with undergraduates to expose them to authentic research practices, to improve student and instructor learning outcomes, and to broaden participation in science. That's kind of our overarching goal. And you see here a picture of some of the steering committee members. So, why a network? Why create a network on this topic? Well, as we were thinking about kind of the state of the field and using citizen science in higher ed, we felt like a greater degree of dialogue between citizen science project developers and instructors would really benefit all involved. and that by creating discussions of instructors who are using citizen science and projects who want higher ed to use their projects, we could develop recommended practices for the use of citizen science in higher ed. And so why use citizen science in higher ed at all? I know Becky already referred to some things, and you're going to hear some specific reasons that specific instructors have had in a minute. But in general, citizen science is becoming a popular tool for educating students at both the K-12 and higher ed level. And there's lots of reasons for that. One is it's a good way to kind of take that classroom content and link it to something going on in the real world. And when you do that, that tends to improve motivation, improve academic achievement. And this has been noted to be especially true for minorities, for groups that are underrepresented minorities in science. Another perk that became particularly apparent last year, over the last year, is that citizen science can be used in a lot of diverse course formats, online, face-to-face, hybrid. It can be used in lots of different disciplines and at lots of different institutional types. And so it's a really flexible approach that people can tailor to their needs. And it also works particularly well in something like a pandemic when people had to change course very quickly. It changed, the way they did things very quickly. That it provided a lot of options for people to have students engaged with real data in a way that might not have been possible otherwise without an actual lab available, for example. So we have 4 major goals for the network. The first one is to create this broad community of practice, and then all the others kind of are an extension of and feedback to that particular goal. It's also to identify the resources that are already available and out there. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. If there are already resources out there, then we want to be able to create a kind of a clearinghouse to make those available to everybody in one place. And also to develop recommendations for how one can go about implementing and assessing citizen science in higher ed in a way that is evidence-based and meaningful. Another goal is to facilitate the adoption of citizen science in higher ed. And we're going to do that through disseminating useful resources. We also will be creating a peer mentoring system that you'll hear a little bit more about later, where instructors who have used citizen science in their classes will meet periodically with somebody who is new to the idea of using citizen science in their classes, and just being a sounding board and a useful resource for them. And then creating other professional development and support opportunities, webinars and some other sorts of office hours and opportunities for people to come and just say, hey, this didn't work at all, or this worked really well, or how do I do this, or how can I find out about that? And we can try and provide help there. And then lastly, to assist citizen science projects in attracting the attention of instructors. Some citizen science projects really want to be used in higher ed settings. Some are probably less appropriate for that setting, but those who want to be used in that setting, we want to help facilitate their connections with instructors who are looking for projects. And so we will be developing recommendations about what can citizen science projects do to make their projects more easily usable in a higher ed setting. And then also helping the projects develop resources that higher ed instructors can use. Things like, lesson plan sorts of things and other resources, so that instructors don't have to start from scratch when trying to implement some of these projects in their courses. All right, I'll pass it back to you for now, Becky.
That was a rookie mistake. Okay. So I just want to say thanks to Heather. And for everyone, I have put the website, our current website, in the blog, in the chat. So you can just go on there, you can click on it to go straight to the website and see what's what with the website. There will be some advancements to this website in the coming year, so you can always expect to see some more improvements there. And as you go through, one of the things I would really like you to notice is that we are really trying to bring together a community for resources. You know, like Heather said, we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. And so one of the things that we're going to be doing now is talk about 3 different ways that we've used citizen science. And to me, one of the things that I've come to find out over the years of talking to various faculty, trying things for myself, is that you can go from extremely simple usage of citizen science, one class, you know, just one simple lecture, and that's it. Or you can do way more complex things and integrate multiple citizen science projects over the course of an entire semester and linking them all together through your content. So it's really up to you. There is no particular way that you have to do things. So let's start with Thomas. And keep in mind that we are also trying to attract as many different higher education entities as possible, from community college to R1 universities, liberal arts colleges, everything in between. So let's start with the community college instructor to say what he's done.
Can I share my screen?
Yes, you can. I give you permission.
Thanks. Did that work?
No.
Well, I guess we'll do without it then. The long and the short of it is that I got into this because I was trying to address basically 3 needs and that are linked.
Hey, Thomas, we got you now. Let me see your screen.
Yeah, well, that's a big improvement, isn't it? So one of these needs was STEM students looking for research opportunities. And without going into any detail, this is, of course, a particular challenge at many community colleges because of the fact that the teaching loads tend to be heavy, deans unsympathetic, and the students generally unfamiliar, in my experience, with the practice of science. Right? Citizen science groups, the ones I work with happen to deal with watershed monitoring, but a lot of citizen science groups have education and outreach goals that if they're not affiliated with an academic institution, may be difficult for them to fulfill. And then from the institutional perspective, in fact, community colleges want to offer undergraduate research, but run up against problems such as unfamiliarity of many faculty members with the whole idea of doing research with undergraduates, although that's changing for the better, thank heavens. So again, very briefly, the approach that we've taken is to join up with local citizen science organizations, provided that they have active environmental monitoring programs and are willing to consider creating or even funding student internships. And then, of course, we need faculty to provide the mentoring and assure academic integrity, and also who are foolish enough, committed enough to take on yet another commitment of their time. And then we need institutional support. One of the things that I find has increased the attractiveness of this approach is to be able to offer credit for research projects through independent study courses. And of course, the college provides lab facilities, information resources, equipment, and the benefit of collegial context with people in other disciplines. So I give you just one example here. One of the citizen science groups that studies the White River here in Western Michigan actually provided funds for using grants to create summer internships for a student research assistant. And this met with the approval of the state agency that provides these funds. They seem to like the idea. And in this particular case, the student studied road stream crossings and their impact on stream health. Wrote a nice research report, got a couple of credits, and said that it facilitated his admission to Michigan State University, where he's working in environmental science towards an engineering degree. And the follow-on to this was a couple of grant applications for remediation of deficient road stream crossings that we ran across as part of his work. And in fact, we just found out we're getting a substantial amount of funding to remediate several of these underperforming road stream crossings. So that in a nutshell is how it works when it works well. I'm through, Bucky.
Okay. Thanks, Thomas.
Yeah.
John, are you ready?
I can go. Let me share screen.
I think I have to do something here.
So along the bottom of yours, it probably says stop share.
All right, so I just switched it over. Oh,
Oh, gotcha.
what happened there? All right, try again, John.
Are you able to see it now?
Race.
One second here. Okay, I was hired by the University of Delaware 9 years ago to get a 2-building complex going for integrated science and mathematics, and that basically biology and chemistry at that time were only graduating under 40% of their students who entered as first-year students. And so by integrating biology and chemistry, frequently biology students weren't graduating because of primarily the chemistry, physics, math kind of requirements. And by integrating courses could increase success. And so I was going to talk about a project, but I knew Tom would be talking about water sampling, but getting biology students actually out in the field, measuring water sampling, doing the chemistry in terms of dissolved oxygen, nitrogen, phosphate, et cetera, getting them to do physics of flow rates and transparency, et cetera, and doing the biology, macro and micro invertebrates and coliforms, and doing it at 4 different sites around campus and a local state park kind of thing was important. And we feel it was part of building better retention in that kind of major. But I thought what I would focus on that my classes tend to be heavily computational. I tend to do a lot of bioinformatics, computational biology, image analysis, and many of the kind of citizen science projects like Eterna and Foldit, I thought, and Philo might not be as much interest. But I recently taught a course in biological data analysis and wanted to focus on the use of citizen science data. So this was a student who really struggled, and she got into looking at the famous citizen science project that was led by E.O. Wilson in Central Park, doing a BioBlitz and analyzing that kind of data. And I think the notion of connecting is that the students more likely to be activists if they understand the kind of data that can be collected and the kind of policy ramifications. And so here's another student looking at a richness. So every week students had to present a poster in which they had to use various kinds of tools and data and visualize them and so on, kind of thing. And they went from, linear regression and non-parametric and 2D, 3D, and even 5D kinds of things. But looking at a lot of citizen science data, here you can see that in the lower left, a kind of a ternary plot, in the middle bottom, a three-dimensional plot where you did some clustering of what are called Voronoi polytopes of groups of data in terms of the citizen science kinds of data. Here again, standard linear regression, histograms, residual analysis, expected versus observed, etc. But in terms of running, five-dimensional data, this is a Gapminder, a tool that students had to import in. And so they have X and Y coordinates, then the size of a point is colored as well by different kind of things, and then run over time. And so I think students were quite excited that they could go from data to this kind of new form of five-dimensional analysis. And they looked at, different states around the country and et cetera, in terms of doing some of these kinds of things. Here were some radar plots, and Florence Nightingale, famous for developing these plots over there on the right, in terms of looking at various kinds of oscillations and so on, kind of thing. Again, here's running a movie where you actually see the Gapminder changing over time, where the dots are moving over time and so on, the situation. And then one of the projects that we've sustained for a long time is getting people to contribute when they travel to the Galapagos to post all kinds of data on the Galapagos, primarily associated with the finches, but then with other kinds of things, and building heterogeneous databases that students can learn something about data wrangling and taking complex data. This was sophomores in a genetics course that they literally looked at a three-dimensional graph with kind of beak length and height and width, and were able to build these complex clouds around each of the 13 species of Galapagos finches. I think it was a delightful piece of work for the students as well. So that citizen science data is extraordinarily rich. Much of it is very well vetted, and the opportunity for students to use it, analyze it, interpret it, and oftentimes that they can then move to also campaigning for policy and so on. So I think that it's important that if we want to engage students in what we call wicked problems that are really complex and important and relevant, that we have the ability to engage them in citizen science kinds of things. So thank you all very much, and I'll stop sharing and take any questions.
Did it again.
What's that, Carrie?
I keep talking with the mute on. All right, so I think we'll take questions at the very, very end. Please write all your questions down. And I'm going to pop in for just a second. And I'm going to start to combine two of the things that we were going to talk about now, because it just seems to make more sense as I'm hearing what Thomas and John had just said. So Thomas talked about using citizen science in his course and in his institution, because it's really, really hard to find community college professors that have the time and the bandwidth to actually do research and train their students in doing research. So utilizing outside organizations to provide research experiences for students. John talked about utilizing citizen science in a quantitative way, bringing in data that is already collected from citizen scientists, stored in public databases that are available for anyone to download, and then teaching quantitative methods using that citizen science data. And so it seems to me that using citizen science in this way is showing students that data does not have to be made up. It does not have to be prescribed. And it is a contribution of people from around the world that collect this stuff that anyone can then pull and use. You know, it seems to me like it's taking citizen science, or sorry, taking quantitative methods away from a textbook and really putting it into the real world. And so whenever I do citizen science in my classroom, I started out not doing any of that, not thinking about those higher level attributes that Thomas and John were just talking about, that they introduced. Whenever I first started doing it, it was because I was working with public school teachers. And I found that when I taught them about fossil sharks, which is what my citizen science project I developed is on, the very best way to do that is just to get them seeing the stuff, to seeing the fossil shark teeth. And so whenever I got into my classroom, I was teaching a non-majors intro bio course. I realized that my students had to be taught biology, but I was not supposed to take them outside because it's an auditorium class. I had over 200 students in my class. No one goes outside for that. But how was I supposed to teach biology without taking them outside to see it? And so we did. We just started going outside. And at some point, I decided to stop being just random and saying, all right, go explore, but instead saying, let's explore, but with a little bit of a purpose. And so I started combing through citizen science projects, finding some. And I would tell them how to do it. I would tell them what citizen science is and let them just try the citizen science project out. It's a way for them to go out into nature, campus nature, but at least going out into campus nature, looking at trees and finding insects on those trees, recording it, and letting them realize that they can look at stuff and still contribute to a bigger community. And if they did that, they got credit, period. That's all it was. And from that, I began to build a little bit more, and a little bit more into my curriculum until eventually I had a course that I taught last fall. And this was a research methods course in biodiversity, where I took 5 different citizen science projects and I combined them together to collect different parts of ecological data from around the students' homes, because everybody left for the pandemic. And so they went outside their house and they collected all this ecological data. We then utilized the data that they had collected, and we started asking ecological questions. We talked about statistics. We talked about sampling problems. We went through the whole writing process. So from the beginning of the scientific method to the end is what I ended up with, but it was not a very quick path. Going from a simple usage up to what took me last year to do was a 5-year journey. And so I've done a lot more things just kind of fooling around. And the reason that I got to do that is because I have such a supportive administration. And so as you go about thinking about using citizen science in your class, that's something else to consider, you know, bringing up conversations with people in your administration, telling them that you have this idea, you want to do this, you want to do that, because when you don't have to worry about your administration, that if you know that they're supportive and behind you, it really freed me up to experiment and see what worked with my student community. Okay, so the very last thing that we had was just Heather going to pop in and tell you how to join the network. And after that, question time.
Great. So I'm just going to start off by showing you the website. Hang on one second. Which you can access at the link that is in the chat. And it's also on the QR code I showed earlier, links to it. Okay, let's see if I can find it now. Got so many things open. Here we go. All right. So this is the website, and it will be changing substantially. We have just completed kind of our first year, which was kind of a pilot run of the of the network, and we're now expanding over the next 5 years. And one of our major purposes in the next few months, as you'll see, is to improve these web resources. But if you come to the website, you will see a little bit about us, and then you can see that certainly it's not just the three of us. Here's the other PI, Alan Hurlbert, that I mentioned earlier, but we have a lot of fabulous steering committee members who have been very involved for the last year. And so we have Gillian Bowser from Colorado State, Karen Cooper from North Carolina State, Colleen Hitchcock from Brandeis, Nataki Osborne-Jocks from Spelman College, John, who you've met, Kalinda from the North Carolina A&T, Jennifer Stiersky from the University of Lynchburg, and Thomas, who you've met. And you can learn more about each of them. You will find our goals and objectives outlined as I've abbreviated today. There are some resources on here if you are looking to start using citizen science in your classes. There's some information here, and this will certainly be being expanded. But also at the top here, there's a join the network. And so you're welcome to click on that if you're interested. And it's a very short little form here, as you see, to join the network. And then you'll be on the email list and find out about activities. You can also upload resources if you want, if you have lesson plans or other pictures, anything you would want to share, you're welcome to do that as well. And there's a contact us button as well. All right. Just a few other thoughts about where the network is going. Oops. Are you still seeing the website? No, you're seeing the blank screen here. Okay, there we go. So there's the website and the QR code. And we're working on improving the address too, but ran into some hiccups with that. All right, so what are we planning to do in the foreseeable future? Well, one thing is we're going to build the network. We're recruiting additional members, improving the digital infrastructure, and finding ways to encourage network interaction. So those are some of our major goals here from the beginning. We're also going to be, as I referenced before, developing resources and recommendations, or warehousing ones that are already created when possible. And so there are opportunities here for people who are citizen science project managers. There are opportunities here for people who are instructors who want to use citizen science or are using citizen science. There's opportunities for people who are interested in evaluation or educational research. So one of the things that we are going to be creating is we're going to be going through and mapping different educational theoretical frameworks to see which educational frameworks support the idea of using citizen science in class. And so we have a start on this, but this will be continuing. And certainly if you have an interest in why conceptually and theoretically there might be a basis to think that citizen science is an effective evidence-based strategy, you're certainly welcome to get involved in that effort. We will be creating a database of assessment and evaluation resources. So if you don't want to have to create something of your own, we will have some available. And so that is another area where people can get involved. We're going to be developing instructor recommendations. So tips on how to best introduce citizen science into a class in a way that is more likely to be impactful, and things you should keep in mind. And then we are going to be creating multi-institutional research collaborations. So taking instructors from different institutions who are interested in collaborating together to assess something about their use of citizen science in their course. So either all the different institutions are using the same project, or maybe they're using different projects, but they're using a similar evaluation instrument. There's a number of ways that this can be done. And so we can provide support for multi-institutional research collaborations. A third goal is to bridge the chasm from those who are the kind of early adopters, people who already believe in using citizen science in classes, and expand this out to be attractive to a larger set of instructors. And we'll do that through disseminating some of the above resources, creating this peer mentoring system, which I mentioned previously. So if you are already using citizen science in your class, you could be a mentor who agrees to work with somebody who's new, or if you're new to it, you could be mentored. And then providing various sorts of professional development that people can access if they would like. The fourth goal that we're going to be doing is to help citizen science projects attract educators. So essentially, we're going to facilitate interactions between the instructors and their projects and citizen science projects, develop recommendations for what projects can do to make them more attractive and easier to use by instructors, and then developing actual resources that instructors can use to implement a particular citizen science project with their class. So there's lots of different avenues that people can get involved in as many or as few of these as you would like. So there are lots of different roles in the network, and you don't have to commit to one particular role for life. You can flop around as works for you. We have a steering committee. The steering committee members you saw on the website, that is meant to be kind of a more permanent body who advises us and helps steer the network and make sure we're keeping our priorities in order. But we also have an advisory board, and these individuals will rotate over time, and in different times of the different years in the network, we'll have different areas of emphasis. So the advisory board membership will in part shift to meet the emphasis in that given year. So maybe we have a particular emphasis in one year on the educational research side, so we may attract, we may try to get more educational researchers involved in that advisory board in some years than in others. Other years, we may have a higher percentage of that board being made up of citizen science project staff. And so that will rotate over time. And one lesson that we have learned through the network so far is that it's hard to accomplish large things with lots of people, right? So we've created a series of subgroups to divide up different tasks of interest. And so we will be recruiting people for different subgroups with different emphases. And there'll be a leader for each, and there will be people involved in each of these subgroups. There will be contributing members. These are members who are involved in some way. You upload things to websites, you participate in meetings, things like that. And then there's just participants, people who may never actually reach out to us, but access resources on our website and things like that. So there's lots of different ways that people can benefit from accessing things about the network. And so if you think you may be interested in some of these subgroups, we will certainly be advertising these to anybody who has joined the network, as well as through listservs. But our current thinking is that we will start recruiting fairly soon for next year's main emphases, which will be the use of citizen science in online environments and the use of citizen science to further social justice issues. After that, we will be focusing on the theoretical frameworks and pedagogical strategies that support the use of citizen science in higher ed, and compiling assessment resources. And then the year after that, we will really be focusing on creating those implementation recommendations and the assessment recommendations, as well as the recommendations for citizen science project staff. And then each year, we also will have resources available to support a couple of different subgroups that we have not come up with yet based on membership interests and needs. And so essentially we have money to support small stipends for people to be involved in these various subgroups, or be involved as a peer mentor, or someone who is being mentored, or someone who's creating resources that citizen science project staff can use to attract higher ed faculty to their projects. So there is some small amount of money available to be involved in some of these efforts. We do have periodic meetings, but not, we try not to overly burden anybody. And so, you know, sometimes we meet just with the steering committee. Sometimes we'll be meeting with the steering committee and advisory board. Sometimes the entire network, whoever has joined the network, will be invited to meetings. That'll happen once a year. And then, and most of that will be virtual. But we also have money to send people to get together in person periodically, smaller groups. So there's subgroups that we talked about creating on different, talking about different topics. We have money for them to get together at a couple different instances in person to try and make forward progress on creating products that could be published or put on websites or made available in some fashion. All right. So we'd love to have you involved, whether you are a citizen science project staff, an instructor, an evaluator, an educational researcher, or someone else with an interest in these topics. There's lots of different ways to be involved, and we have some built-in flexibility. So you may have great ideas that we've never even thought of, but we would be happy to support and get behind. So we appreciate your time today, and we wanted to leave time for you to ask questions or you know, provide comments or anything that you wanted to do. So I will send it back to Bucky now to open it up.
All right, wonderful. So as a quick reminder, there is another introduction. So just basically a mimic of today, next Wednesday. Many of you signed up for both today and next Wednesday. So I just wanted to let you know it's going to be the same information on next Wednesday. But in July, I believe it's July 14th, we are having our first office hours. And that's going to be a time for you just to show up, and we start talking all about how to use citizen science in the class. And it's going to be led by you. You're going to be asking questions and just getting advice. So with that, I open up the floor to you guys for anything you might want to ask now.
I'd like to just make a mention. Could you hear me?
Yeah, we got you.
Okay. I'm using something related to citizen science in my teaching. I'm an environmental toxicologist, but I don't do research. I'm a 2-year professor, but I do environmental justice projects. And I'm wanting to get community members involved in citizen science that serves their area. And right now, I'm looking at mostly post, natural disaster recovery. This is in the Houston area. So one of the projects that I'm starting up, unfortunately, COVID put it on hold for a while, is getting community members involved in local remediation of soils that are contaminated with post-flood event pollutants. And, so I'm trying to get 2-year college students in a freshman class to collaborate in these projects and have them be the trainers with the, community members. So I'm looking for a lot of help, a lot of suggestions, and I wouldn't mind being part of the group, because the citizen science I've done in the past has mostly been just my students work with community members on projects like on iNaturalist. But I really want them to be more community focused, particularly with environmental justice.
Bucky, can I respond to that? So Brian, I urge you to reach out to a fellow named James Brunswick. He's with the Delaware Department of Natural Resources, what we call DENREC. He's building an environmental justice map of Delaware. And part of this is for many people to be able to identify where the Superfund sites are, how it's historically impacted, minority groups. And I find that literally engaging students in mapping, that very frequently that they discover an awful lot about their own backyard and so on. And I have had them do things on using fractal analysis of gerrymandered districts and Voronoi polygons to look at access to resources and so on, kind of thing. So I think that, that looking at these kinds of remediation efforts in a thing that relates to their own community, and then getting them to go from a class to go to a zoning board or to a hospital review board or things like that, that they not just present to your class, but they present to an outside constituency, makes an enormous difference.
So Veronica asked a question, the best way for beginners to get involved. Heather, what do you think?
Sorry, I was just typing.
Oh, okay.
I'll jump in here. So I think if you get on the email list, then do that join the network sort of link. We will send out periodic newsletters, just letting you know what's going on in general. And if there's ever anything in there that you're like, hey, I'd love to be involved with that, just reach out and we're happy to hook you up with that. But we will also be sending out like specific requests, like, okay, we are going to we're starting a subgroup on X topic. If you want to be involved, sign up on this form, those sorts of things. So those would be good ways to be involved. And I think probably one of the things that that we may do early this fall is, as everybody's kind of getting back in their work mode potentially, is sending out kind of a survey of in what ways do people want to be involved? What do you how do you want to participate? And then we can help kind of match make people with their desired interests and try and move it forward. So I think right now, getting on the email list and then just reaching out through the forms that we send out or through email, if there's something in particular that you want to be involved with. And again, nothing's a lifetime commitment. And these are meant to be kind of, people focus on one topic for a while and then that finishes up, and that, so you're not committed forever. The network is funded for the next 5 years, but beyond that, that doesn't mean that you have to commit to doing something for 5 years. So for example, as we have subgroups starting, we'll send out an announcement, say, hey, if you want to be involved, let us know. As multi-institutional collaborations are coming up, we'll send something out saying, hey, if you want to be involved in one of these projects we already have, or if you have a new idea for a multi-institutional research project you want to be involved with, let us know. The idea here is that part of our efforts are kind of a service to the community to lower barriers to use, but this is also a research coordination network. So there will be research occurring through the network through these various subgroups. And so there will be publication opportunities and other sorts of things through certain involvement. So some people aren't interested in that. Some people are interested in those sorts of things. And so we want people to be able to kind of self-select. And we'll start populating the advisory board again this fall. And so we'll send out a notice about that too, saying, here are the sorts of, this is what being on the advisory board would entail. It's a 2-year term and those sorts of things. And so you can, self-nominate yourself for that as well when that call comes out. Yeah,
I had a question. Yeah, great. This is awesome, you guys. This is fantastic to hear. We actually do a citizen science-based inquiry lab or CURE lab in our intro bio course. We've been doing it for years and we've just moved it online. I'm actually part of another RCN that's coming from the researcher's perspective and developing kind of like, they're all tropical researchers and they're like, how do we do these sort of citizen science online lab type things, right? And so it's really exciting to hear you guys come from it from an educator's perspective. And kind of what you were saying, Heather, about how can we get involved? Because I'd really like to get involved in like development or mentoring. I think I have some experience with that, so it'd be kind of fun to apply that beyond my own classroom. But do you have a sense of how many people or projects are currently percolating in your group so far, or is it still just kind of getting things settled and organized?
So this this first initial year, we basically started off with people that we personally approached about being involved, because we needed to figure out what we wanted to be, what we needed to be, I think, as much as that makes sense. Like, you write a proposal, but there's a disconnect, you need more details in order to actually start moving forward. And so we spent a lot of time just discussing, like, what should this network be? What would be most useful to people? And so we wanted to keep those conversations relatively small so that we could make some progress on that front. So we're just now getting to the part where we're expanding. So I think we currently have something like 70 people who are involved in the network in some fashion, but that a lot of those individuals are relatively new, as we've started recently pushing out to more people. We have sponsored a special issue, which will be coming out this fall or early winter, of Citizen Science Theory and Practice, about the use of citizen science in higher ed. And so that also brought some additional people into the fold. So that's kind of the numbers that we have, but we certainly see, we've just now started trying to really attract additional people. I will say that one of the things that we did in our first year is we tried to get a sense of how widely is citizen science being used in higher ed and what sorts of ways are people using it. And so we did a comprehensive literature review, and we also sent out instructor surveys of people who asking if they were using citizen science in class and asking details about that. And so that's, we actually have a publication that's in review for that. But we know from that citizen science is being used fairly widely in classes, but that a lot of people don't feel like they have a lot of tools or resources to do that. Everybody's just kind of figuring out how to do it on their own. They don't really, know what the best way to do it is. And the assessment of it is being done more through student reflections, or the science of it's being evaluated, but not really the benefit of doing it through citizen science. Which is great, which is not a problem. But so we were trying to figure out what are the holes that we could help fill. And so, so we're just now kind of starting to kind of expanding now that we feel like we have a really clear kind of vision of what it is we think we can contribute to the field.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you. That's great.
We're at 3 o'clock now, which is when we said we would let you go. So if you need to leave, certainly feel free. But if there are additional questions, we're happy to stick around for a few minutes and answer those. But we really do appreciate your time.
Heather and Bucky, I said I'm not available next week. I'm running a workshop. So, but thank you very much. Glad we got some feedback today.
Yeah, so, thank you for being here.
Thanks so much. Cheers. Goodbye.
I don't generally have a question, but so I've been, I guess, developing a network of people at Globe, using Globe, which if you're familiar with Globe. And so we have an undergrad professor network. And usually, which we have once a semester web meetings, probably 12 to 15 professors come on per meeting. And there might be 30 involved total. And it can be also international. So we have Canada, Germany, Ghana, and South Africa people calling from. So anyway, I just wanted to let you know that's what I've been doing. And
Yeah.
because we find that we didn't know there were so many people using Globe in their classrooms at the undergrad level. And it turns out there's quite a number, but then, sharing our best practices and what everybody's doing has been helpful.
Yeah, no, yeah, it's been exciting. We've, we've interacted with a lot of people with Globe. And yeah, I mean, it's great. Like NASA hires teachers even and people to, I guess, create resources for educators to use Globe. So yeah, it's fabulous. I've been very impressed with everything I've heard about Globe involvement. And then when we sent out the survey for instructors about who's using citizen science in their courses, there were not many projects that a lot of different instructors were using. Like most projects, only 1 or 2 instructors were using, but iNaturalist and Globe were the 2 that stood out that larger subsets of instructors were using. So it's definitely a very valuable resource that's being used.
Kevin, I appreciate you kind of sending me some information, just junk at udel.edu. When I was editor of Biology International, it was a major concern of ours, and we tried to do lots of connections. We did one special issue on biodiversity that we had a good international set of contributions, but the United States withdrew from the International Union of Biological Sciences, unfortunately, and with devastating effect. And